He's a tall man.
What does it all mean?
This is where the archaeology has been found.
Oh, hi, how are you? Oh, look at that. I need a planter.
A shrine to a belly button.
This is a rock with salt?
He digs for clues in his dusty.
Look at that. No one gets into this place. No one. Nice. Whoa, don't take me too far. Now that's naked archaeology.
Where's archaeology? Where's archaeology? Where's archaeology?
No one, besides Jesus himself, has had more influence on the Christian movement than St. Paul the Apostle. There are more New Testament writings credited to him than anyone else. They're called the Pauline epistles, and it's these writings and lessons that have directly shaped modern-day Christianity. But Paul wasn't a disciple of Jesus. He never met Jesus or heard him preach. You won't find him chowing down at the Last Supper. Paul only converted to Christianity after Jesus had been crucified. You could say he was the original born-again Christian. But it turns out that Jesus appointed James, his very own brother, to lead the Jerusalem church after the crucifixion.
I thought I told you to kill that story.
So if James was the appointed leader, how come Paul gets all the credit? Some scholars are now suggesting that Paul was a spy, a Roman agent sent to infiltrate the Jesus movement. We're out to come face to face with the real Paul, the real James, and the real message of Jesus. Let's set the stage. It's around 31 CE. Jesus has just been crucified, but his illegal revolutionary movement is still burning bright. The Romans are still persecuting Jesus' followers, and James, Jesus' brother, was next on their hit list. James was now in charge of the Nazarenes and preaching a fervent, anti-Roman, pro-Judean message.
Violence is the only answer to Rome, but it must be a nation's violence. What else can save us?
Josephus the historian mentions him, and the Gospel of Thomas calls him James the Just, the righteous one, because James believed in a strict adherence to the works of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, just as Jesus did. So where was Paul in all this?
Just listen to this.
It's from Paul's epistles that we are given the few facts about Paul's early years.
Read down there where it's marked.
He was born Saul in 5 or 10 CE in Tarsus, in what is present-day Turkey. He received a Jewish education, supported himself as a tent maker, and he was a Roman citizen. By his own admission, he was actually a persecutor of the early Jesus followers until he set off on the road to Damascus. And somewhere along the way, he experienced an incredible vision. There, in front of him, Jesus appeared.
Here's to the first angel I ever met.
It was a resurrected Jesus with a message. He wanted Saul to lead the world in a new direction, towards a whole new brand of Christianity. The vision and the message so overpowered Saul that he converted to Christianity on the spot and changed his name to Paul. This miracle is known as the Pauline conversion. But is this the true story? Military historian Rosemary Sheldon thinks the facts point to Paul the Roman citizen becoming Paul the Roman spy.
Is the story as told in Acts plausible? Visions can be had and conversions can be done, but an historian does not deal in miracles. An historian has to deal in facts. And so we looked at the story and we said, okay, what could the alternative be? A man acting in this manner. What might Paul be doing other than preaching? And that's where the undercover part came. That if you look at the possibility that he was an intelligence officer, it all makes complete sense. And it's much more logical, and no miracles are required to reconcile that kind of story.
Before we go accusing anybody of being a spy, let alone one of the fathers of Christianity, we'll need to know what to look for. I'm off to travel in the footsteps of Paul, and I've asked Rosemary Sheldon to tell us how to spy on a spy.
Watch what he does. See his actions, not necessarily his words. See who he associates with. Paul is always surrounded by Roman officers, Roman governors, people of wealth. Certainly a spy has to take on many identities, not just a change of a name, but it could be the change of your appearance. You have to be able to move between one milieu and the next. Those are good skills to have if you're in the intelligence business.
You're getting interested, huh? Sure, I'm interested.
I'm going to start my journey by looking into Paul's actions. And what better place to start than where it all began, in his hometown of Tarsus. I'm here with Professor of Religious Studies, Barry Wilson.
So we're walking along an ancient Roman road, one that Paul undoubtedly walked along many times.
There's no other choice, right?
No other choice. This was the road that connected Tarsus and the plain of Sicilia behind us. It takes us in the direction of the Taurus Mountain.
He was a determined guy to walk, what, thousands of miles?
Thousands of miles in pursuit of his religious quest.
He changed the world.
He did. Perhaps more than any other person has ever done. He has changed the world, and I think there's more to Paul than meets the eye. There's a lot of things that we really do not know about him when we start to look at what he says critically. We don't know what kind of upbringing he had. We don't know anything about his family connections, how Jewish they were. We don't know what to make out of his conversion or so-called conversion experience. And it really wasn't a conversion experience. It was a remarkable, life-changing experience. But if we don't know from what, it's hard to imagine what that transformative experience really was. And when he comes up to Jerusalem many years later, I mean, he only spends a couple of weeks with the acknowledged head of the followers of Jesus.
Jesus' brother.
Jesus' own brother, James, a person who knew Jesus and knew what he stood for. It's from Paul that we get the Christianity that we have. But he truly was a mystery man.
So when we analyze the text, we find out that we don't know much about the man. But Paul's sketchy past didn't stop him from becoming Christianity's top guy.
Make yourself so valuable your employer can't let you go.
And before Paul had his born-again experience, he had another identity, a bounty hunter, hot on the trail of the Nazarenes. And the showdown between James and Paul was inevitable.
All that work, courage, going after these thugs.
And as archaeologist Robert Eisenman will tell us, that confrontation did happen on the steps of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. Not just a showdown.
I don't suppose you'd fight a man without your sword.
A showdown, throwdown. I'm on a search to find the real St. Paul, the man celebrated as the father of Christianity. And as it turns out, the closer we look at the life of Paul, the more questions we have. Rosemary Sheldon has told us that having many identities is crucial to being a spy, and Paul had plenty.
Who would that be?
Before he was Paul, he was Saul, and he was a bounty hunter persecuting the Jesus movement.
You're a special something or other, aren't you?
Prosecutor.
Until he had his conversion experience and became St. Paul.
Get down there right away and take care of things.
Yeah, I'll do that.
We're off to the Second Temple steps in Jerusalem. It's here that a showdown is said to have occurred between Paul and James, the leader of the Jesus movement after the crucifixion.
I'm a patriot and a zealot.
A meeting, archaeologist Robert Eisenman.
Robert Eisenman, Revolutionary Theory, take 1.
Robert Eisenman has compared the writings of Pope Clement, called the Pseudo-Clementine writings, with the book of Acts. In Acts, Paul watches on as Saint Stephen, the first Christian martyr, is stoned to death. In the Clementine version, and Clement, by the way, was there witnessing these events, a Paul-like figure actually assaults someone. Eisenman believes that someone is not Stephen, but James, the brother of Jesus.
Basically, you're decoding the text.
Decoding multiple texts, putting them together side by side and trying to find out what actually underpins them all.
If we go to these other texts,
that were kind of delegitimized by the official church, we get the inside story of what Paul really did on these steps.
Who Paul was, what he did, who James was, how important he was, the real story.
The Second Temple was the center of Jewish worship at the time of James and Paul. It's where the action happened. Thousands would assemble. Roman sentries watched the masses closely, always on the lookout for a riot.
Clement comes to Palestine just at the time that the authorities have invited the early Christian leaders to come onto these temple steps and quiet this mass of people down here who the document admits were hungering after the Messiah. So each of the apostles, just like Acts, is pictured as giving his speech in turn until finally my Lord James speaks last. And the narrative said he's just about to win the crowd over to how he is seeing the Messianic movement when an angry, riotous enemy, a hostile man, the man who was our enemy, emerges and yells at the crowd, "Why are we being misled by these people? Come, attack them."
According to Eisenman, that hostile man was Paul. It was him that ordered the crowd to attack James. But the New Testament says Paul was just watching over the coats of the guys who stoned Stephen to death. As it says, "And when the blood of Stephen, your witness, was being shed, I myself was standing by and approving and watching over the garments of those who killed him." Eisenman thinks the book of Acts was out to clean up Paul's image. He believes that Acts is covering up Clement's version. It's not Stephen who is stoned to death, but James who is thrown down the temple steps.
You're saying the guy in Acts that's called Stephen, that's really not Stephen. That's really the brother of Jesus, James.
What Acts has done is substituted the Jews attacking Stephen for Paul's attack on James. Both occur around the early 40s. The attack by Paul on James is so embarrassing to the early church that a whole other narrative is developed overtopping it.
It's embarrassing because here's Paul stoning the brother
No,
of
not stoning. Physically attacking him. That's what these stairs are about. Throwing him down these stairs.
I wouldn't want to be thrown down the stairs. You're saying this, what Paul did is he grabbed James physically and he threw him down stairs like this. I'm just thinking of what it would feel like to be thrown down these steps. I don't think it would feel very good.
James is said to have escaped the riot with the help of the apostles, but suffered 2 broken legs from the attack. For Saul the persecutor, another identity change was needed. The Messianic movement was still growing, and for Paul it was time to switch to Plan B. If you can't beat him, join him.
Here's to the first angel I ever met.
We're traveling in the footsteps of St. Paul the Apostle, the man known as the father of Christianity. But some scholars think that Paul might have had another agenda.
It's hard to tell what you mean.
That Paul was an undercover agent for the Romans. So far, we've learned that Paul was a persecutor of the early Christians, now led by Jesus' brother, James.
Judea was a nation once. Someday she will be again.
But for Saul the bounty hunter, a public persecutor is too well known, and he needed a new cover story.
You need help? See the angel. Who's this angel?
And in military historian Rosemary Sheldon's view, Paul's miraculous conversion is the most convincing evidence of all that he was a Roman spy.
Why do you suspect that maybe it's not authentic?
Well, you have to imagine he's working with police from Jerusalem. They're a pretty hard-nosed bunch of people. And they're with him on the road. We don't know what they heard, whether he was the only one that heard it. But suddenly, poof, he becomes a Christian. And think of it in modern terms. If this were a bunch of FBI guys working for J. Edgar Hoover, and suddenly one of them turns and says, I had a dream, Karl Marx came to me, and I've seen the light, and I've now gone over to the other side. They'd either kill him on the spot, or send him to a mental hospital, or lock him up.
According to many scholars, Paul's message seems to have nothing in common with the message that Jesus' followers had been hearing until now. Paul's message, which he said was given to him by Jesus,
A very important guy calls himself the angel.
seems to completely contradict what the Jesus of history taught and said.
Maybe a diagram will help.
He emphasized circumcision, respecting the Sabbath, keeping Passover, and maintaining a kosher diet. But Paul heard a very different message.
I'm a reformed man.
In his version, you didn't have to circumcise, you didn't have to follow a kosher diet, and he canceled all the Jewish holidays. Why was Paul so off message?
You know, even angels can get their wings clipped.
You got the scissors?
And then there's the big one. Jesus said, I come not to bring peace on earth, but the sword. But Paul never hung out with revolutionaries. More than this, Paul seemed to be very comfortable with the Romans. James and his gang weren't buying Paul's approach.
Thanks, friend.
Friend to a Roman?
And since Jerusalem was James's turf, Paul took his brand new message and hit the road. The first stop on his salvation tour was Ephesus, an ancient Greek city in what is today Turkey. And it's here that Paul was able to interact with all the cultures of the ancient world. We are here with Professor Barry Wilson.
Ephesus was the Istanbul of the time. It was where East met West. But in Paul's time, this was a major port city. It was a cosmopolitan city. People came from all over the empire here, and it was on a major trade route.
You make a change at Ephesus, and there'll be a ripple effect around the world.
This was a strategic location for Paul and his message.
Paul's MO was always the same. He targeted pagans who were attracted to the religion of the Jews. They were called God-fearers, and they had their own sections in synagogues. The synagogue where Paul preached disappeared thousands of years ago, but Professor Wilson wants to show me what he thinks is a reused stone from that very synagogue.
Simcha, I want to show you something absolutely amazing here at Ephesus. Take a look down here and just tell me what you see.
Wow, a menorah. This is amazing.
I've never seen it referred to. Everybody who comes to Ephesus either stands on it, walks on it, sits on it. Nobody notices it.
It's clearly original.
The book of Acts refers to a synagogue at Ephesus. And here's archaeology that links us to Paul.
When Paul was here, there was a synagogue. We've never found the synagogue. And yet this is the only Jewish symbol that we find in Ephesus.
The lost synagogue.
The lost synagogue. This could very well have come from that synagogue that Paul talked in. This is absolutely crucial.
You should publish it.
That's a good idea.
So Paul could move through many worlds, like a spy. In fact, no one was better at it in his day than Paul. Maybe at Ephesus he delivered his famous lines.
To the Jews, I pretend to be a Jew. To those who observe the Jewish law, I pretend to be observant. To those who are not observant, I say, I'm not observant. To the weak, I pretend to be weak. I have become all things to all men.
A man of many faces, indeed. Next, I'm on my way to the place where Paul was imprisoned by the Romans. Or was he?
Give me time to run this down.
He's a tall, tall man. He's a tall, tall man.
This looks like the last act of Hamlet. It's the last act for all kinds of things.
We're traveling in the footsteps of St. Paul the Apostle, the man credited with spreading Christianity around the world.
Has anybody invited you to join the Crusaders?
We're continuing our journey to Caesarea on the Israeli Mediterranean coast. Caesarea was the city in the book of Acts where Paul was tried and imprisoned. But to Rosemary Sheldon, the story just doesn't add up.
This is a rare opportunity we have to be sitting on the actual spot where Paul was arrested and supposedly tried before the Roman governor. This is the Roman governor's palace, and Paul would have walked through the entrance and sat before the governor Felix. What the charge is, we're not exactly sure. He caused a riot in Jerusalem, but why the Roman governor would care about some Jews arguing, in Jerusalem is obscure.
If I was making a painting of Paul in front of Felix, I would have him in chains. Is that what happens?
Acts tells us that the guards were told to give him a very loose leash, not to make sure he had access to where he wanted to go. He never suffered physically in any way. He seems to live in the governor's palace.
It brings to mind how they treated Jesus. I mean, overnight they crucify him, and Paul seems to get a very different treatment.
That's right. We know that Jesus was followed. We're told that there are men being sent by the government to see what he's doing. What does he do publicly? He starts a riot at the temple. He is surrounded by men that are known revolutionaries. Paul doesn't cause any public disturbance, doesn't preach against the Roman state, makes no public statement that could be in any way considered seditious. He's not surrounded by revolutionary types. It seems that the Romans want him for the information he has. I think it's because he has been investigating the revolutionaries, and so they can debrief him.
So he's not an enemy in custody, he's an agent brought home.
He's an agent brought home in protective custody, and even when he's brought to Rome, he remains an intelligence asset because he's an eyewitness to what is happening in Judea. He can testify to the groups that he infiltrated. He can identify people to the Roman authorities, and it's going to be not too many years after he arrives that there's going to be a full-scale war in Judea, and so an intelligence asset with that kind of first-hand information would be very valuable to the Romans.
So Paul has hit every point on our spy checklist. His associates, his aliases, his actions. On our next program, we're gonna travel even further and dig even deeper to see how scrolls found in a cave in 1945 reveal further evidence that Paul and James were worlds apart.
He's a tall man.